Agriculture Foundation. We are recording this session. We're not recording the breakout sessions, just so you all know, all the presenters agreed to that. We're thrilled to have that available. So the Regenerative Ag Foundation is part of the Food and Farm Democracy Initiative, and we're thrilled to be working closely with our partners at the National Sustainable Ag Coalition, RAFI, and the Red Clover Collaborative. And this is one of the key issues that we have been focused on for the past year plus is about withstanding the assault, addressing the issues that have come with the funding for USDA and EPA, and as well as some of the challenges that we're experiencing in Minnesota and other places. So if you could go to the next slide. And so the Food and Farm Democracy Initiative, I just want to mention that we actually called this the Grassroots Farm Policy Project. We had a couple of different names that were thrown around, and largely because of the issues that we're talking about today. A few weeks ago, we did change the name to the Food and Farm Democracy Initiative with the recognition that we just can't get to where we need to go without having a strong democracy underpinning everything. So that has been why we really want to emphasize that in the name and the work we do. We have to give a huge shout out to the Waverly Street Foundation that kind of got us kicked off with some great funding, and PACT came in, and Crown Family Philanthropies, and several others. So just thrilled with that funding that's allowed this to happen and to grow. We use the vast majority, almost all of the funds go out through a participatory grant making process. And we can talk about that more in breakouts if that's something of interest to you all. But that's been a key tenet of this, is to try to get a broader, larger array of organizations and individuals and farmers that are raising their voice around these important issues. If you go to the next slide. So briefly, we have an hour and a half in front of us. It will be jam-packed. We have I'm just giving this brief rundown here, and then my colleague Evita with RAFI will providing a little bit more of an overview on movement building, and then the great panel that we've been talking about. Sarah Hackney from NSAC will then follow up with a little bit of connecting the dots and talking about the policy implications of all this. And then we'll have breakout discussions from that, and we will close by within the hour and a half. So now, just before I turn it over to Kavita, if I could go to the next slide, I just want to, so many of you, I know, I live in the Midtown Phillips neighborhood of Minneapolis. Which has been kind of in the heart of awful lot of things that have been going on over the past several weeks. And I just have to say, just thinking about it and thinking about the incredible movement, the horrible tragedies and the human rights violations that have been happening there, and the incredible movement that has sprung out from that. And I just called it here the Just Do It movement, because people are just stepping up and providing mutual aid, providing meals for their families, providing rides for people. There's rallies that are going on. The prayers and vigils. If you the bottom photo there is just of my block club that got together after the killing of Alex Preddy, and we all got together and just didn't know what else to do but to all come together to sing and pray. It was just so touching. And then the absurdity. I have just come to love the absurdity of people. Just these are art sleds that people made at my local park. And just so many of them had an anti-ICE message to them. People are standing on street corners, just holding up a sign saying, ICE out. It's just people are doing whatever they can to just try to address the horrible human rights violations that are here. And it's a movement that I feel like we in philanthropy have a lot to learn from. It is truly grassroots driven. There's been some great funder support, and I need to give a shout out to my former employer, the McKnight Foundation, has just been tremendous with this. And it's about supporting the movement. And I really feel strongly that philanthropy cannot build a movement. It can amplify movements. And this is a movement that's there that philanthropy can amplify. And so I just feel like over the next years, we're going to be thinking a lot about what has happened in Minnesota and other places and feeling what can we learn from that? How movements can truly go forward. So that's all I have to say about that. And now I want to turn it over for a little more, giving some meat to these bones, to Kavita to talk more about movement building.
Thank you, Mark. Can we move to the next slide, please? Thank you. So one thing that I want to say as we're kind of getting this webinar kicked off is this webinar is not about the threats that the movement has faced. We've talked a lot about the threats the movement has faced. We will talk about it again today, but really what we're here to talk about is how these movements have shown strength and been able to show up to those threats. So before we dive into the panel itself, I wanted to talk a little bit about how movements stay strong and these components that we at FFDI see being crucial to that. I tend to think about this a little bit in an anatomy sort of sense. So run with me as I make some slightly extended metaphors here, but it helps me to understand this, and I hope it helps y'all too. So to start off with, for movements to stay strong, our skeleton really is organizational health. Without that baseline, without that skeleton, nothing can move if this isn't tended to. From there, I think about the next kind of piece of the puzzle as engaged constituencies, and that's very much the muscle of movement work. This is how they know what they're aiming for. This is how movements stay accountable, and this is how they have the literal strength to move. From there, we go to advocacy, reach, and influence. I like to think of this a little bit as ligaments almost. If you are strong, if you have that muscle, but you're not actually able to reach, then you're inherently limited in what you're doing. You need to be able to reach beyond yourself to be able to move the system that you operate in. And that's where advocacy is crucial in order to maintain this overall strength. And then finally, of course, the most vocal part of this, if we're sticking with the anatomy comparison, is communications and narrative. Without those engaged constituencies, without that muscle we talked about before, communications and narrative don't know what you're trying to say. Without advocacy, you're limiting the audience that hears you. One of the things that I think about this, if we're comparing this to the human body, none of these things work in isolation. You can't focus on just communications and narrative if you don't have the other pieces. You can't focus on just advocacy and influence if you don't have the other pieces to inform that. So I guess the goal that I'm going for here is to really narrate that movements are holistic. They need to be viewed as such, and particularly for them to be able to move and be nimble in the ways that Marx was just talking about. All of these pieces need to have attention paid to them. Next slide, please. The other thing I wanted to mention here is some of the cycles of movement work. We are in a time where we are both in an assault and also need to be aware that movement work didn't just start now, right? There are centuries of movement work that have been led by marginalized communities, and they've survived those too. Our approach to this work very much needs to be balancing that short-term survival along with the long-term growth and thriving of these movements. And so I think about this very much in waves, right? There are times when things are helpful towards movement work. There are times when things are not so helpful to movement work. And I very much see where we are as this little red dot right here. Things are tough. And at the same time, so much of how people have shown up in this moment already is really reflecting not only their ability to be creative, but their ability to make sure that they are still working and moving regardless of what the barriers are against us right now. I find it really helpful to remember that even in these times, it can feel like we are in an exceptional moment, and we are, and there's so much history behind us to help us remember that there have been exceptional moments in the past, and we are going to get through this. Next slide, please. So I'm going to just take a minute to talk about a few tactics for movement work. Certainly not going to be taking the attention away from our panel, which is coming up in just a moment. But when I thought about this, there are some general tactics that I think have shown themselves over time to be vital for movement work. So one, of course, is persistence and resistance, but that happening with great intention. Secondly, I think it is really important to think about messaging from a very strategic standpoint. So not only understanding what are movements saying, what are they not saying, to whom are they saying these things, and to what end. Messaging is complicated, particularly in times like these, being really mindful of how that messaging looks, being able to support the ability to conduct that kind of messaging is really crucial. Of course, movements also need to have kind of baseline levels of safety to keep their constituencies engaged, to be able to do that advocacy work, to be able to engage in all those pieces we talked about a couple of slides ago. And that ranges from digital safety, legal safety, and beyond. And I know we'll talk about that a little bit more later on. And finally, perhaps most importantly, is that movements have to work against being in isolation. The forces that we're facing right now thrive all the better if we are not allowed to talk to each other. I think the organic work that's happening in Minneapolis is a great example of this. People come together to make movement. Sometimes it's because they plan to, but all the time it's because they need to. And I think it's really important for us as funders to think about how are we making sure that we are opening the door so that people can do what they need to do when they need to do it. So these are just a very few examples of how movement work can stay alive and how it can thrive. So from here, I'm going to turn it over to Edna, who's going to introduce our panel so they can share their own perspectives as well.
Thank you. I'll leave it to me to get distracted chatting with some of the participants right before my chance. My name's Edna Rodriguez. If you folks recognize me, just want to clarify. I used to be with RAFI. I'm still representing RAFI as a consultant, but I'm also with Red Clover now. But I have been part of this initiative with RAF, RAFI, and NSAC for a while, and we'll continue to work in that capacity through Red Clover. And I'm really excited to be here to present this amazing group of speakers to you all. The group that we have here that we're lucky to have with us was selected because they bring with them various experiences of having to deal with the moment that we're all faced with right now in various ways. So it's impacts on their programs, without going into details, like Kavita said, impacts on their program, impacts on their funding, having to let go of staff, having to worry about possibly being labeled domestic terrorist, having to worry about signing new terms and conditions, figuring out, should I be doing policy work? Does it matter anymore? Should I do state? Should I stay in it? What does all this mean? And making sense of all of this during a time where it is extremely stressful to just exist as a human being. So today we have Zoe Holloman with the Midwest Farmers of Color Collective. She's in Minneapolis. So in addition to her work supporting farmers of color who are now having to worry about this whole illegal DEI bullshit, excuse my language, I think you can always count on me to curse at least once during any presentation. She's also doing this work living in the city of Minneapolis. And that brings a whole suite of challenges. We have John Benedict, who was part of the Climate and Equity Project, which has changed its name also, and I don't remember the new name. Does anybody know the new name? Grassroots something or the other, but it's part of this project. And he brings with him a completely different experience from the Southwest part of the country as a farmer as well. We have Hannah from Pennsylvania, a much larger organization that expanded its reach from Pennsylvania all across the Northeast, only to have her interrupt their work because of all of this nonsense. And then John Ella from Kansas, representing a Black organization where you can't DEI proof their name because of who they are, and having to deal with all the federal shenanigans. So with that, this is going to be a panel, but I'm really going to pass it to them to let them introduce themselves, and then hopefully it'll turn into organic conversation if we have time after. So I'm going to pass it to Zoe to get us started, and we'll go from there.
Thank you, Edna. Okay, I'm going to share my slides, so hopefully this will happen smoothly. Okay. All right, can folks see my slides? Okay, great. So hi, everybody. Thank you again for being with us today. And thank you to Kavita and Edna and Mark and everyone who helped organize this, and for giving us a little bit more on why it's important to come together right now. I'm going to start with just my intro. So Midwest Farmers of Color, I'm the executive director and one of the co-founders, and we really started in 2020 with about 50 farmers coming together to discuss policy around fair and just resources for our farmers. We decided to do that right in the beginning of a pandemic. And but also another time of what felt like a crisis and a real also awakening of about the vulnerabilities of our global and corporate dominated food system, and what we brought, what we have always been talking about is how integral we are as farmers of color to the health and the well-being of our communities, and our economies, especially in crises. So I'm going to, sorry. And today we're about 150 farmers across several states. We have several organizing projects that are really all about kind of 4 areas, and that is building social connections, building political power and representation for farmers of color, building economic power, and then growing and strengthening infrastructure and capacity of both farmer of color organizations and our larger network, and then how we interact with other organizations kind of in the broader like national network. Okay. And just, again, about, I'm sure everybody has heard about the metro surge that's in Minneapolis and St. Paul, and it's now moving to the suburbs and to the rural areas. And I just wanted to say for folks who really aren't sure or aren't close to it, that it is by no means over, despite what you may have heard in the news. It's not focused solely on immigrants. It is focusing on all people of color. It has been really horrific, and violent and very traumatic to everyone, and not just farmers, but I think especially farmers. And it feels like they're changing tactics due to kind of what I think of as the amazing organizing that we have done in the Twin Cities, to say that we won't be divided. But I think they're moving now to suburbs and rural areas, and it's very concerning because we have just less folks organized with the Constitutional Observer Movement and some of our other folks, although we are doing a lot. The flyer on the right is about an event that we just hosted this week, and it's African American and African farmer organizations, and other organizations across different issue areas just coming together for a national call to action for investment. We just hosted that, and it was a really beautiful event. And we're both talking about the urgent needs that we have now, and then also thinking about long-term investments, kind of similar to what we did during the uprising after George Floyd's murder. So I just encourage folks, if you have resources or other ways that you'd like to give, please visit our website. We're doing lots of mutual aid and other support of farmers dealing with different levels of emergency. So yeah. So we were super proud to have been a part of the Climate Equity and Policy Grant Review Committee that was hosted by RAFI. And we participated in that in 2022 and 2023. And then we've been part of others since then, to really help build the field of like farmer justice organizations engaged in policy. And we've also been a recipient of some capacity building grants so that we could pay for staff and engage in some different farmer fly-ins. We participated in the Farmer Climate Action Rally in 2023. They've supported us in building capacity to host our own farmer and elected official listening sessions that we've had with members of Congress and state legislators as well over the past couple of years. And then also to, continue to work with allies in coalition building like the Hill Food Alliance and RAFI and Rural Coalition, NSAC, and National Young Farmers Coalition, which has been so incredibly important to have the support. I think both building the field is incredibly important because you have lots of great grassroots organizations that, our people are the front line of what's happening. And we really need support to be able to bring our folks to elected officials to say, hey, this is what's happening. And how can we partner to address things that are happening that are critical in this moment right now, and then going into the future. So we participated in advocacy for the Lasso Act, which was a federal policy and which would have provided $100 million a year for land access to under-resourced farmers like ours. About 73% of our farmers don't own the land that they farm on. And that is an incredibly unstable and extractive way to farm. To have to invest in your soil, in infrastructure, and then to have that be taken away when the landowner sells the farm you're renting. It's just incredibly challenging. So that's been a priority for us, and we've been fighting that since, kind of day one. And so in addition to that, we fought for the Farm Down Payment Assistance Program at the state level, and that brought over $1.5 million for basically grant assistance to farmers who were emerging farmers, BIPOC farmers, young farmers, veteran farmers, to be able to buy their farmland and create some more stability for themselves. Some other ways that we've been really trying to invest in both individual farmers and then systems that we feel like are incredibly critical in the Midwest to support our farmers are through our Radical Resource and Land Fund, which we developed over the last year and a half, which was a way that we brought farmer of color organizational leaders to design a integrated capital fund, so loans and grants, to figure out how we wanted to invest in ourselves, both in individual farmers and also systemic projects that would help the region. So we had our first cycle last year, and we were able to invest about $750,000 in 10 farms in a few different states. And it's just been incredibly powerful to see the impact of the fund actually coming to life in its first cycle after so many years of talking about it. And then we also helped stabilize some BIPOC incubator organizations that have really been supporting the development of farmers of color. So about in 3 different BIPOC incubator farms here. And then additionally, we've been supporting climate innovation learning exchanges between farmers in our network. So in August, we brought together farmer of color organizational leaders from 9 different organizations to do a couple of different learnings. So we went to Chicago to Erica Allen's Urban Growers Collective, and we learned about an industrial size composting facility that was really incredible and shows, like, I just think, major innovation both for soil health building in urban and rural areas, as well as community wealth building for BIPOC communities. And then we also supported Sober Mesa Farm in Indiana, who brought Jairo Restrepo, who's an internationally renowned soil building expert, to come and teach farmers about how to use regenerative methods to have long-term success in their soil. And then, I think it's kind of just ending with a call to action. We really feel like right now we need funders to boldly invest in us. We are doing the things that will get us to the outcomes that we all want to see of, healthier communities, healthier local economies, healthier soil and waters. But we need support, and we need support in specific ways. We need to be supported in the coalition-based policy and learning from our peers, which sometimes means, you know, just having the time and space to talk to each other. We've also been thinking about doing interviews with other BIPOC farming organizations that have received USDA funding, to really learn and understand, like, what were your goals, initial goals? What were the things that you really wanted to learn? And then what were some of the challenges and things you weren't able to do? Because that feels important for us in developing our own strategy for, what we want in policy, and how we can work with government funding if we can. We also need long-term investment in us, and we need to be partners with funders as opposed to subjects. And I think that means a more of an ongoing conversation and a commitment to us to not just have the perfect answer right away, and to not put that burden just on us, but to carry it together, thinking about liabilities and all of those things. Sometimes it feels like funders don't want to carry any of the liability. But it's like, hey, if we're really in this together, we need to share that, you know? And then really investment in land and environmental stewardship. We know that 360 or 70 million acres is going to change hands from the baby boomer generation. And we want to make sure that goes to sustainable farmers, to farmers of color, to the folks who want to grow and provide for our regional communities, to help a myriad of different crises that we're facing as a country, as a world. So that's my time. I'm excited to talk about more things, and thank you.
Thank you, Zoe. After this, we're going to be sending out slides from all the presenters, so don't worry, you're not going to miss anything. From here, I will pass it to John.
Thank you, Edna. My name is John Benedict. I'm a small-scale farmer from McNeil, Arizona, specifically Cochise County, which is right on the Mexican border. Where I sit right now, we're only about 18 miles north of the border. So as you can imagine, with right now's climate, I'm in an extremely, extremely unique position. In fact, my farm is located inside of what's called the Border Patrol checkpoint. So we're in these areas that are operated right now heavily by the federal government. I also have the privilege of serving as the local co-op CEO. Our co-op down here is made up of about 30 small-scale growers, row croppers, and ranchers. And as far as today's topic, if I could just add some things to what Zoe said. Number one, I'm extremely grateful for Red Clover and RAFI. Just 2 years ago, our group, we had literally no voice as far as policy goes. One of the things we noticed in Arizona, we're dominated by large industry, things like the Farm Bureau, the Cotton Growers Association, the Cattlemen's Association. So what we saw when it came to policy was our voice was just getting drowned out. The single individual really had no impact. Since linking up with RAFI, since getting support from Red Clover, what we've really been able to do is build our organizational capacity. And I think as far as today's conversation goes, one of the biggest concerns I have is just in a short amount of time, we went from a group of small farmers, many of us on 2 acres or less, who had no voice, to we've actually built this really strong coalition. I'd like to joke the co-op functions similar to the Small Farm Bureau, if you would. Just as recently as last month, I had the privilege of going out with one of our local NSAC partners, Pinnacle Prevention, and we were able to successfully advocate for $1 million in funding for the Double Up Food Bucks program, which is one of those programs that's only available to the small scale growers. And I think in Arizona, just to give you some context, last I checked, there were only just over 20 specialty crop growers who are Black or African American, and only one of them is on a farm above $1 million. So in our state, you have less than 20 Black farmers. Most of them are under $50,000 a year. So you have these single farms that have no voice. But since linking up with RAFI, what we've been able to do is build our coalition down here. And I'm super proud of the support that we've gotten from Rachel. And we've been able to quickly pivot our language to being able to have these conversations in a Republican-dominated state. I know as far as the food system right now, many other states are in the same place. We essentially lost everything. SNAP-Ed was one of those programs that benefited us greatly. Smaller farmers and organizations don't have the capacity to do things like nutritional ed, which really function as marketing at scale. We lost our SNAP-Ed. I was one of the farmers in Arizona who was part of our Climate Smart program. I planted an acre of prickly pear cactus, which require no water and produce a fruit rich in antioxidants. We also lost the funding for that. Many of these other programs, such as LFPA, local food purchasing agreements, we also lost that. So we're at this time right now where farmers really have essentially the confidence, the morale is at an all-time low. And I love what Kavia said earlier is that we have to work against isolation. So as awesome as it's been for us to build our small coalition in Arizona, once I was able to link up with RAFI, link up with Red Clover, it gave me more confidence just knowing that we're not alone in this. Another thing that I really learned I wouldn't have had any idea before linking up with Edna was in the current climate, if you want to take a lot of these organizations out, compliance is going to be the attack vector. We don't have the staffing to have lawyers, people on staff to work in that area. So again, by having some of this funding through the private donors, we've been able to link up with these larger groups and really take this defensive position where at least we're able to maintain what we have right now. And I think as far as today's conversation where this is important is my biggest fear is this small amount of capacity that we have built, some of the success that we have had. I've been able to meet with people like Senator Mark Kelly, some of our state level representatives. My biggest fear is if the air comes out of the balloon on the policy side, we're not going to be able to rebuild that capacity. Just this year, we had one of our legacy farmers, a third generation farmer who went from farming to literally taking a job as a janitor. And I think that with basically consumer confidence at an all-time low, the farmers' confidence at an all-time low, these guys I talk to, they're planting their fields less, interest rates are high. We can't take advantage of some of these programs that were slowed down, such as things through NRCS, EQIP, some of those things where we're struggling. If we don't pull strong and find other methods of funding, my biggest fear is that we won't exist if there is a change in administration in the next 3 years. So as far as today's talk goes, if there were just a couple other things I wanted to say is be ready for another government shutdown. And if there is a way that we can keep these small groups like the local co-op going, like Zoe's group, like John Ella's group, please help us to stick together. We're not in this alone, and we have had a lot of success working together. And what I'm hoping is with some of these talks about this streamlined farm bill coming out, hopefully through these local coalitions, we can work together with our representatives in our state and have a bigger impact as far as our federal policy asks. So I appreciate everybody having me today. And if there's any questions, I'd be glad to answer them towards the end.
Thank you so much, John. That was super powerful. Are you ready, John Ella? Can I pass it on to you? You're good? All right, I'll pass it on to Dr. Holmes.
Because all I have to say is ditto, ditto. Zoe said it and John have said it. I bring you greetings from historic Nicodemus, Kansas. It's the oldest all African-American town west of the Mississippi. I can't erase DEI. I can't erase Black. I can't erase any of those things. So we just put one foot in front of the other, put on our Nicodemus sweatshirts, and we move forward. And that's what we have done with our farmers. In 1999, KBFA, Kansas Black Farmers, was organized, and they were organized to band together, and we had like 48 row crop farmers at that time in Kansas, and they wanted a collective vote in the lawsuit Glickman versus Pigford versus Glickman. And so some of our farmers, they received some of the the award and everything like that, and most of them didn't. And so there was a group of our farmers they wanted to keep being litigious. And I was at K-State. I was assistant professor at Kansas State University. And the other side of that group came to me and they said, we've got to learn how to do research and how to write grants and how to get involved with SARE and do some things like that. And so in 2012, they brought me on. And I was doing that while still trying to work at Kansas State. And I took early retirement in 2015, and so that I could work full time and I could move back home to historic Nicodemus, Kansas. We still farm a small piece of land that my great grandfather homestead in 1877. So we've always been a farming community. We've spread that out all over the state of Kansas. We brought what we wanted to do and how we wanted to work with all of the farmers across the state like that. But they've been impacted. We had such a wonderful surge in during the Biden administration, and I'll say what you want, but anyway, we had a wonderful surge, and we were bringing on programs, and they were making the USDA office accountable for making sure that we knew about programs. We were planting. We knew about subsidy programs ahead. We could still advocate for food versus feed and making the subsidies more equitable. We could still do that. We were getting access to capital and markets. There was the land access grant. That is phenomenal. It's huge. It's unheard of. It was actually providing us with funds that we could help train our farmers and get them securely on land. Just like John, most of our membership, after the row crop farmers passed away and lost land and that sort of thing, 63% of our membership, because we went from 9 in 2012 to 193, but 63% of them are urban farmers, and I don't call them gardeners. They farm, they do as much work as a farmer, and I just wanted to bring on women and let them know that their brothers might be in the combine sometime, and they get to be called a farmer. So do you, and so we were going forward like that. And we were having so much success with really growing and developing and having resources and a commitment from the USDA. And we thought we needed to just really expand. And during that time, there were some private donors that came to us because we worked with the Rural Coalition. Liz, I'm happy to see you on there. Tandalin, I'm happy to see you on there. Dania helped us try to save one of our farmers. She's not with Rural Coalition, but Dania is just a goddess among us all. Helped us save some of the land for one of our farmers that was passed away. Helped us secure farm numbers and things like that. So we moved forward with that. But all the while, we were also trying to grow farmers and introduce agriculture and the pride of farming and being an entrepreneur back to our youth. And I wanted to say, as of last year, we've served in a summer youth program over 700 inner city, and then we started partnering them with rural kids so that they could get FFA and 4-H, under their belts too. 93% of our high school kids graduate from high school, 93%. And another 87% are accepted at a post. I'm excited. Let me calm down. 87% have been accepted at a post-secondary higher education or trade school. So we're doing the work. We also, during the 2020 census, found that in Graham County, the county I'm in, we were one of the only ones in the state that didn't lose BIPOC farmers. We actually gained them. I'm trying to stay on my notes and get things done. Our farmers are increasing production, strengthening soil health. We have a partnership with Kansas State and Colorado State. We're teaching our farmers how important that soil is. But we were already doing regenerative practices. We were already no-tilling and doing some things like that to save our earth. And we learned that from our indigenous brothers and sisters. And we've just incorporated and been doing that. Grassroots agriculture organizations like KBFA are being asked to do so much and to navigate with so little. We lost our farmers market grant. We lost one of our farmers just got signed up with USAID when that was taken away. We also 2501, it's still out there. It's supposed to be secured by legislation, but they're slow rolling or not giving us reimbursements. There's no new RFPs out there. And so those are things that we're having to move forward and keep our farmers up front. So my call is to partnership and to have you stand with us and to have you listen like you're doing today to us. Liz introduced me to a young man. I'm 70, so I can't remember everybody. But they introduced me to a young man that was over an organization. He was from the Potawatomi tribe. And Liz, because of you introducing us and saying that we were a good organization, they gave us $72,000 that I could do anything with. So we've got our high tunnels up. We've got some basic little equipment. We've got straw bales so that we can grow in that. So we're still moving forward. We just need you to stand with us. Ditto.
That was amazing. I don't understand why you didn't want to go first, but okay. Because you're an amazing speaker.
I didn't have to say the hard stuff.
Okay, so last but not least, we will move on to Hannah Smith from PASA. Hannah.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Dr. Holmes, for reminding me what energy looked like in the past. So PASA serves farmers, and by farmers, I mean anyone in the practice of farming, regardless of land or business ownership or employment status, primarily throughout the Mid-Atlantic, Northern Appalachia, and Southern New England. Really across the whole sustainability continuum at all stages of farming, from aspiring to actively farming to retiring. And Pennsylvania itself specifically has the most farmers under 35 in the nation. So our vision is a world where agriculture nourishes, heals, and empowers. We provide pre-apprenticeship programs, apprenticeship programs, certificate training programs, technical assistance, conservation practice installation, on-farm research in both soil health and farm financial viability. We do farmer outreach. We've got urban and rural peer-to-peer networks, and we do policy work as well. We all know that this current context that we are all trying to navigate is on the heels of charitable giving declining. In 22 and 23, there really was this deep decline after some of the highs of 20 and 21. A lot of that really rebounded a bit in 24, but the issues with inflation and market volatility don't just impact the farmers and our organizations, but funders as well. I can't tell you how many funders have come to us and said, our boards just aren't letting us give right now because of market volatility. Particularly if we're talking about climate, social justice, any kind of resilience work, I would say it's not just market volatility, it's like psychological volatility in terms of people being able to support the work. The political environment has really constricted giving overall, and social justice and environmental giving has been particularly hard. So we know that you funders are facing contractions as well. In 2025, just to give you an example, typically USDA's NIFA OREI program in organic and agroecological research funding, it had been growing from about 50 million maybe 3 years ago to 63 million. In 2025, zero awarded. So that's not just a funding gap, that's an interruption in research pipelines, farmer education, university partnerships, and a lot of trust building infrastructure. And that is such a key theme right now. So at PASA, we had received a $59 million Climate Smart grant. And when we applied for this, we were being very strategic. This was not just simply to grow our organization. It really was to lift up smaller partner nonprofits so that they could build capacity to then access federal resources in the future. We really wanted to lift up the voices and needs of the BIPOC and historically underserved farmers in and outside of our network, including a good number of indigenous communities that we work with across the eastern US. We wanted to create pathways for farmers who had long been excluded from federal conservation programs. At that time, we also secured a $34 million farm and food worker relief fund, through which we were able to distribute over 40,000 COVID relief funds to farm workers, and that was regardless of their immigration status. The intent here was ecosystem development. Early last year, both of those grants were terminated. So if you can imagine for a minute, in Pennsylvania alone, the Climate Smart grant program was making $90 million available to farmers that disappeared overnight. That is not a gap that is going to be easily filled. So we spent a year, a very, very traumatic year, appealing the decision. We had support from the Southern Environmental Law Center to do a lawsuit, and we worked on renegotiating with the federal government. After a year, almost to the day, we were actually able to renegotiate what had been the Climate Smart grant under the new advanced marketing for producers. However, we're coming off of a year that has been so unstable for our staff, for partner organizations, for many of the farmers who are mid, conservation practice installation. And honestly, the most important thing is all those communities that PASA asked, please trust us. It seems like the federal government wants to fund what's important to you. Please trust us. And when that disappeared, that has to have impacted people's trust, even for those of us trying really, really hard to do right by farmers. In this renegotiated contract, all of the subawards have gone away. So all of that lifting up of other smaller nonprofits is gone. We know that the equity work is gone. The climate focus is gone. That doesn't mean we aren't internally prioritizing equity and climate, because we are. But it does sometimes feel like a Herculean effort to fit within this framework. So really, at this point, a lot of that connective tissue has just broken down. For our own organization, when it comes to staff positions or administrative support, we just don't have the money for it. This new program provides very little funding. It provides a lot of money for farmers, which is awesome, but to actually run the program is very challenging. This is what destabilization looks like, right? And we all know that in these times, that's kind of the point, right? They want to destabilize the work that we're doing. Dr. Holmes, when you were describing like just the energy that existed for the first time, oh my God, USDA is like really listening to our farmers, and it just went away. So this moment is really different than moments we have encountered in the past, because it's not simply about the dollars. We need movement scaffolding. That scaffolding started happening in the Biden we can't let that go away. All of us in our organizations have experienced so much trauma. It really drains staff morale and institutional capacity. Again, that trust building that we're working on, I don't blame farmers who just have thrown up their hands in the air. And I would say I even see where some farmers we were working with that had intergenerational skepticism of the government and let us in for just that little bit of time. I'm not sure we're ever getting those farmers back. So, we need funders to help us with this vacuum that has been created. Really, philanthropy is becoming, the stabilizer in a way that honestly doesn't seem healthy. We want your support. I can't imagine how you're going to be able to provide the level of support that's needed, but really, what is needed is general operating support. I bet every single person on this call, every panelist would agree that we need flexible, unrestricted dollars to be as responsive to farmers as we possibly can. We need it to retain staff that survived the last year. We need it to cover administrative infrastructure. We need it for equitable farmer engagement. We need it to absorb some of that volatility without re-traumatizing everybody who has been impacted by this. Project restricted grants do not solve systemic destabilization. So some of the ways that you can help are bridge funding for partners who've been impacted, explicit support for equity and climate, healing and trust building resources, and a lot of patience and risk tolerance. And I know that for those of you that are grant officers and defending funding to your boards, I know there's not a lot of risk tolerance right now, but that is what's needed. So outcomes from each of us are probably going to look a little slower. Metrics are going to be a little messier. Policy wins might be more on the defensive side instead of the proactive and expansive side. That does not mean that the work is failing. It means that we are doing our best to hold the line, which right now feels like a Herculean task. So the sort of strategic questions that I would put before philanthropists is not, should we fund innovation? I can't tell you how many times we are asked, we want you to do something new, something different, something you haven't done before, something we've never funded before. That's not helpful right now. What is helpful is to ask, like, will you stabilize the infrastructure necessary to survive what the federal government has the situation that we're all in right now because of the federal government. So if we can't access these unrestricted dollars, smaller organizations are going to disappear. Trust with farmers is going to erode. Climate progress will stall. And we know that the next Farm Bill cycle will lack any organized grassroots infrastructure to be able to deliver the types of services and supports that our farmers need. So if philanthropy can hold steady or even modestly increase flexible support, we will be able to preserve capacity so that when policy windows reopen, this movement is intact, it's energized, and we can take the next step forward. So lastly, I'll just say that we've been fighting to keep this work alive. I know every person in here has been. And you know what? We survived, right? We survived. But survival is not the same. It's not the same as stability. In this environment, philanthropy is not supplemental. It is truly foundational to our survival. And so how you respond in this constricted moment will shape the trajectory of sustainable agriculture and farmer equity for the next decade at least. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Hannah. That was powerful. We are out of time for this section, so I'm going to pass it on to Sarah to connect the dots for us.
Thanks, Edna. Hey, everybody. My name is Sarah Hackney. I'm the Coalition Director with the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition based in Washington, D.C. And I just wanted, you're going to hear from me for just a few moments before we jump into breakout space for Q&A and candid discussion. But the first thing I want to do is just offer like a really sincere and heartfelt thanks to all of our panelists. I hope it was helpful for you all to hear and to feel just like the depth of folks' care and commitment for their communities, the creativity and the resilience that they're displaying and working through right now in real time. Even me as like someone who hears from folks all the time, I'm really feeling it, having just listened to all those stories, and grateful to all of you. So thank you all for sharing so thoughtfully and so candidly and effectively, like what your lives and your work looks like right now. Again, you'll only hear from me for just a few moments because we really do want to give you some time to be in discussion, and that'll be in breakouts in slightly smaller group space. But before we do, I want to take just a moment or two to zoom back out and to connect some of the dots and the themes that you heard coming up through folks' stories and narrative back to the landscape of what's happening here in Washington, how what's happening in Washington is shaping the field, and really importantly, where might there be some political organizing and advocacy opportunities collectively for us as a movement community with funders' support to shape. So got a few of those to share with you for the next few minutes. And first, as you all well know, the federal government invests billions, literal billions of dollars every year in funding that directly shapes our nation's food and farm system. It is not small dollars. This is hundreds of billions of dollars. The Farm Bill alone is nearly $1 trillion on a 10-year time scale. That collective investment deeply shapes the landscape that farmers and communities find themselves in as they try to navigate feeding their families, growing food, getting it on tables. Over 40 years, we had a lot of real wins in that Farm Bill environment. I would be the last to say it was enough. It's never enough, but there were some real wins there, right? Billions of dollars in conservation funding for farmers to adopt sustainable practices, dedicated investments specifically serving farmers of color, beginning farmers, investments in regional food systems. Again, it was never enough, but it was something. The last 13 months, you don't need me to tell you that that edifice has begun collapsing. And to be clear, it's not on its own. That's deliberate choices and actions made, both actions and inactions, from Congress and from USDA here in Washington and out in the field. I will not repeat the mess of last year. I know you all lived through it and saw it too. The frozen funding, the executive orders, the terminations, the impact on human life, right? Just hearing from folks in Minneapolis right now and the trauma that folks have been through, the terrorizing of our communities. That is all real, and I do not want to minimize it at all. And I want to name that the most important thing we can do is look for where are our options to fight back. Where are the ways we can say, no, this is not how we want to build our world. This is not the way we want our federal policy to look. So let me talk for just a moment about the Farm Bill. Is Farm Bill year? Yes, again, a Groundhog Day experience for those of us in DC. Some of you are following this closely. Some of you know this really well. I just named, right? It's a huge investment. Next Tuesday, the House Agriculture Committee is going to mark up their draft version of what could be the 2026 Farm Bill. I will tell you right now, the assessment from INSAC and many of our partners and peers is it is a non-starter of a bill. Doesn't do enough. It's largely a status quo bill. It's largely a retrenchment bill. It is not as bad as it could have been, but it is nowhere near enough, especially again, as we think about the stories you just heard. It does very little to redress all the damage that's been done in the last 13 months, much less look forward to a better future. But what is right? It's one thing for me to say that. For me to say that and for it to have impact, we've got to advocate and make that case clear to decision makers. Again, that means we've got to be talking to the House. We've got to be talking to the Senate. We've got to make clear to our elected officials that this ain't it. If we're not speaking up for it, others will be. I can tell you from here in DC, there's a lot of pressure on that House Ag Committee to support that bill next week, despite everything you just heard. We need to do our part to push back, not just next week, but throughout the rest of this year. That we want a farm bill, but it's got to be a good enough farm bill for all of us. There's opportunities for funders to be involved here, and ways just to get a few quick touch point examples of where and how funders can help us do this work. First and foremost, you can support C3 allowable advocacy. That can be general operating grants that specifically don't earmark for lobbying. That can be project grant rule projects and dollars. And that can critically be investments in the staffing and the infrastructure that advocacy takes. It takes cycles. We have been trying to get this farm bill done for 3 years. I've been in DC for 14 years. Farm bills are not one-year projects. They take years to do the advocacy, the organizing, and the power building to really shape them. So just a note, right? It's not a one and done, it's a multi-year investment. And we know you know that, but just want to name it again. There's so much room for so much more muscle in this movement to be up against the enormous corporate power and resources of big ag here in Washington. I see it every day. I cannot tell you strongly enough how visible and visceral it is and how much we need more muscle and more investment to be effective advocates here in Washington. Next slide. Awesome. I'll talk a little bit about USDA. Oh, USDA is a mess right now. There's just no kind way to put it. They're making it much harder for both NGOs, for nonprofits and organizations, and for farmers to access resources. You just heard more effective stories than I could ever tell you from Janella and John and Zoe and Hannah. I just want to affirm that's real. It's happening nationwide, right? USDA is hemorrhaging staff. They are pushing folks out, and they are willfully warping and shifting programs within their statutory authority at the agency. It's a really huge issue, and we know it's an enormous amount of federal resourcing that is really hard to replace. And yet, we've got some work to do here to try to find a way. A couple other things I want to put on your radar that underscore why we need to push back at the agency right now is, for a long time, I've said as an advocate here in DC that, you can have bad staff, you can have bad implementation, but if you've got something held in statute, right? If Congress passed it, if it's in the law, if it's statutorily held, you've got some backbone, right? You can say, well, it's the law, you got to do it this way, USDA. You can sue folks, you can take them to court. This administration cares a lot less about that. Just to give you an example, the Department of Justice has announced that they are not going to defend against, so if USDA, let me step that back to take it really clearly. We've worked for decades to win what are called set-asides in federal programs. That's cases where when farmers have been historically shut out from resourcing, for example, when farmers of color or women farmers have been shut out from access to conservation dollars, we've worked to win set-asides. These are targeted, focused pools of funding to make it more possible and more accessible for more folks to access the resources they've been unfairly denied. It's an important policy tool. While they have not named it publicly, we are suspecting and starting to see evidence that the agency may just not intend to implement those set-asides going forward. That would be a huge loss in access of resources. Worse, the Department of Justice has already said quite clearly in writing that they're not going to defend against challenges to that prioritization. That means if someone is harmed, if a farmer is harmed, DOJ is not intending to defend its set-asides or USDA set-asides. This is a huge concern. This is a huge issue, and again, it's going to further make it tough to access resources. What can funders do? How can we engage with USDA? How can we push back and have some muscle here? First and foremost, I want to name, there's a lot of room for legal work here. The ongoing legal support and one-to-one guidance that organizations and farmers need to help themselves assess their risk, figure out what to do. Can I accept this award? Should I apply for this funding? What is my risk? What's my liability? That's high touch, high relationship work. It needs resources and support. Similarly, litigation. I know Hannah on this call has been a real leader nationally at PASA in being brave and being a plaintiff in litigation that challenges unlawful agency actions. There's a whole cohort of really brave nonprofits and farmers stepping into that role right now. It matters a lot. Again, we have got to use every tool in our toolkit. That's a really important one. There's great legal work happening, Farmers Justice Center, Farm Commons, a whole bunch of other places. And that's one of the only tools we have when the agency is ignoring its statutory responsibilities. The last thing I'll note where funders can help and engage on the USDA front is, as you're hearing from your partners and your grantees and folks in the field that they're losing access to USDA funding or that it's turning into an unstable funding source, Can you step in, right? I heard somebody named bridge funding. Like, do you have the ability to help them resource that work to fill that gap, whether it's for the short or the long term? That really matters right now. And if you value it and you want it to keep happening, that may be what's needed. Okay, next slide. Yes. Yep. And I'm just noting what Zoe's making in the chat. Yeah, this is real. I almost skipped this piece, but before I jump into C3 allowable. The executive orders issued last year from the administration, essentially aiming rhetorically to make any work that they consider DEI to be largely illegal. Executive orders don't have the force of law, and yet the agencies are taking them as directives. It is creating a lot of extraordinary risk and difficulty for organizations, especially those led by and serving folks of color in the field. And there is a lot of need, again, for more legal support, for more safety support, and for more just strategic backing to help them fight back and make smart choices for their organizations. Okay, last two from me. Democracy, just a small topic. I mostly want to put on your radar here that food and ag movement is asking and wanting to be more involved in what it is to protect and sustain democracy right now. I know full well most of us on this call are C3s or other nonprofit or foundation structures that don't take electoral positions on candidates. Great. That does not mean we can't do C3 allowable, like legal, safe, totally okay to do activity that protect democratic institutions and norms like free and fair elections. So if you haven't, I'm going to drop a couple resources in the chat for this. Something that we're trying to do at INSAC is help build the sort of baseline support through INSAC and the Food and Farm Democracy Initiative for organizations to know their rights, know their responsibilities, and what they can do safely and legally. There's a lot of opportunity for funders to help here. Acknowledging right, some groups, this is baked into your DNA. Heck yeah. For those of you coming late to the game, we want to welcome you in too. Funders can offer trainings, one-on-one TA, pay for some Alliance for Justice time. Share the resources and opportunities you may come across in your own cross-funder segment. All right, last one, Anna, if you don't mind jumping to it. Two more, and then I'll wrap up. Last one more. Perfect. Okay, others made this point better than me, but I'll just close with this really simple, straightforward one, which is amidst everything, what folks are doing is the work in their communities, right? We are still power building, we are organizing, we are finding ways to offer technical assistance, mutual aid, and build infrastructure that keeps farmers growing, that keeps families fed. Anything and everything you can do to resource that work, to support that work, to invest in that work matters right now. I put a bullet in here about pooled funds. I want to give a shout out, both Food and Farm Democracy Initiative on the call today, the Life Fund. I think I saw Esperanza come across, Wild Seeds, Transformational Farm Bill, the Village Farmer Fund that Danny leads, funds like Zoe's at Midwest Farmer Collaborative, Midwest Farmers of Color Collaborative. These pooled funds are really good at being responsive and getting resources out into communities quickly. So if you know you work with a funder that is slow to move, harder to move, resourcing is in the pool funds that move responsively and then invest in communities is a great way to go. I have gone over time despite my efforts to be very brisk. So I will close with thank you. Thank you for all you're doing. There is a lot more to do. We can't do it alone. We want to do it with you. We need to do it with you. And we really look forward to continued dialogue.
Wonderful. Thank you, Sarah. We now have a few minutes, I say 10 to 15 minutes for our breakouts. So the plan is to have 4 different breakouts where we can all have some of the speakers and some of the FFDI people together with others that are on this call. So we'd love to break that out. Lisa, does everything look good?
Everything is good. I've just opened the rooms.
Great, thank you. Looks like we have everyone back and we are just about at time. This was an incredible conversation. I guess just to say, our panelists, you made me wonder what I've been doing with my life. Thank you for all that you've been doing. It's been fantastic. And I got to give a huge shout out, I guess, SAFSF, Sustainable Agriculture and Food System Funders. Maggie doing all the background work. It makes it so easy for us. And thanks to Lisa and Anna for doing a lot of the background work. But yeah, I guess that's it. We will be sending out the presentations to everyone. Really appreciate you taking the time to learn more and to be in solidarity. Thank you.